Hello, welcome to this episode of A Creative Approach podcast. I'm your host, Karen Poirier-Brody. My guest today is Diane Richey-Ward. I met Diane when she was my drawing teacher at American River College, a campus that is part of the Los Rios Community College District. Diane is a fine artist based here in Sacramento, though you'll learn today about her far-flung worldwide experiences and shows. Getting home after an extensive amount of traveling means a lot of organization after unpacking and a lot of doing laundry. I'm home about 2 weeks and it's finally getting done. Still, it is a satisfying feeling when the chore is complete. Another thing I do enjoy about routine tasks is the time you get to reflect on things. Some of my most creative ideas have come during meal prep or laundry. Other times I just get lost in the moment and reflect on the sensory input, like colors, textures, and focus on my feelings at the time. The creative force comes later. I think these reflective moments do inspire. One task that's a bit more tedious, as it's computer-related, is working on my emails. I've discovered I receive so many that essential items go overlooked. I've started to unsubscribe as I work through the list. I should have tried keeping up before, but it seems so overwhelming that I'd given up on a tidy inbox. I'm considering one of the services that sort through one's incoming mail, though I worry that system may be as bad as I am at overlooking urgent messages. If I get bogged down in my current deleting process, I may employ one of those services. As I prepare this intro, I've been editing photos. I'm attending a scrapbook event and will upload these images for printing at the store in the town where the crop will be. While I've had my digital layouts printed for me and shipped to me in the past from one of the big printing services, I've not tried ordering photos to be printed the same day in the past, as I'm a person who usually prints photos at home. It's going to be perfect for the day that I'm planning. My paper scrapbooking takes a back seat to digital these days, too. It's good to be nudged out of our routine now and then. I look forward to handcrafting as I create stories on my pages. However, I may have limited creative time because I'll visit friends and try hard not to eat all the treats that will be around. Even if I don't manage to get a lot done, I love to view what others are making. The creativity of others often stimulates new designs for art, scrapbooking, and sometimes even an idea for this show. Today's story will open insights into the life of a fine artist. Join me in conversation with Diane Richey-Ward as we discover her creative approach. Hi, welcome to A Creative Approach podcast, and welcome to you, Diane Richey-Ward, and glad to have you here on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And usually when I get going on this, people say, Diane Richey-Ward, who is Diane Richey-Ward and why is Karen talking to her? And, well, I can just start off that you're an artist and I learned a bit about drawing from you, but maybe we can just go into what you are doing right now and what you've been doing in your career. So you are an artist.
Yes. And I have been working primarily with the medium of drawing for the past 30 years or so. And every 10 years, I alter my approach, going from straight drawing to mixing maybe drawing with sculpture or mixing drawing with collage. And the last 3 years, I've been combining drawing with photography. So that's my latest interest.
Well, that's great. And so that, a little variety
yeah.
to change things up. And right now, you have a show going on, which is why I thought it's time to interview Diane, because I just went to visit that at the E Street Gallery here in Sacramento. And that was awesome. It's wonderful. You're showing there with Nick Sheldon and two totally different approaches.
Yeah. But they kind of looked pretty good together, I thought.
I think so too. No, I think it's a really good show. I enjoyed it a lot. And I liked seeing, to tell the audience, I own a piece of Diane's work, which is just drawing with, but this approach with the photographs is interesting. So you started that about 3 years ago. Was there anything that really spurred you into doing that?
Yes. Well, first of all, I started off as an artist, as a photographer, when I was about maybe 15. And I worked in the high school newspaper as a photographer, and then I also was really interested in drawing right about that time too. And when I went to college at California State University at Hayward, I guess they call that Cal State East Bay now, when I began working on my bachelor's degree in art there, I couldn't quite decide whether to be a photographer or an artist or a drawing, painting type fine artist. And so I felt that maybe everything had already been said photographically. That's what I thought when I was 22. I can't possibly, do any better than what's already been done. And so I thought drawing had more potential for creativity. So I went that direction. I get so much joy out of taking photographs, and I had a photography business for a few years when I was first graduated from school. But now what happened about 3 years ago was that it was an accident. I noticed that if I projected a photograph onto a drawing, that the potential for visual, dynamics was increased by about, 1,000% by the combination of two diverse visual images. And so at first it looked like a photograph that was stuck awkwardly on top of a drawing. And then as I kept refining what I was doing, I was able to find interesting ways of seeing through the combination of maybe the wicker of a chair and how that affects a kind of a scratchy line as a background, and became like an obsession. And I keep thinking that I'm going to get tired of it, but so far there's no way that I would want to stop doing it now, because the potential is so enormous by which drawings that you use and which photographs that you project over those drawings. And I feel like if I worked 24 hours a day the rest of my life, I couldn't achieve, all the wonderful things that I would want. So that for any artist to feel like the potential is unlimited is what you want. That's what I've been doing.
And then you retired from teaching, that whole sort of hanging out in your studio all the time. Is that a little more possible now?
Yeah. Well, yeah. When you're teaching, you have to, of course, carve out quite a bit of time for preparation and for mentally being connected to your students. At night, I would be thinking about, what I should have said to this student or that student. And now my brain is kind of freed up. And I think that helps, because it was right around when I retired, almost exactly when I thought of this new process. And so I think that is a really good point, that not having to teach makes you quite a bit more creative.
Well, it's not like you weren't producing some art before, but I think, yeah, especially if you're going in a new direction, I would think having more time to devote to it. One of the things I've noticed, well, since you've retired, and you aren't obviously retired from art, is that, well, you've done a number of these internships or artists in residence, I think is what you call it. How about those? Because you've been around the world in various places doing this. Do you find that helps you too in inspiring your art?
I really find that by seeing new things, it's not very complicated, but by being exposed to new architecture and to new artists' works in museums in different parts of the world. But it's primarily through, I guess, architecture that provides a body of images that I can photograph. And then when I come home, the pictures that I've taken while I was in, let's say, Valencia, the potential of using every single one of those photographs, turning sideways this way, reversing the photograph, turning it upside down. I mean, you can imagine how much you can do with one set of new images in this type of process. I'm hoping to go to Lisbon this September, and I just finally realized that particular city has a combination of architects. One of them, Santiago Calatrava, who is a Spanish architect whose work is kind of organic and unusual, and it reminds me a little bit of the American Frank Gehry, but just a little bit more surreal, and a little bit more like animal forms or fish forms, but made as structures that are functioning. So I just took 80 million pictures that I'm still using, and that was 2016 in the summertime. So,
but now you're going to get more.
Yeah, now I'm going to get more. No, but I like that kind of thing, because if you keep looking at the same photographs and if you can't find any new alterations with them, for me, I have to get in a plane and go someplace else. So, and it's not just the architectural photos, but meeting new people, of course. At these art residencies, they have comments on your work. They have possible collaborative ideas that they have with you. And then you get exposed to artwork that you've never seen before, because people, of course, all over the world come at art from such different ways that it expands my vocabulary, so to speak. So that's what I like about it.
Yeah, well, I would like that too. Sounds like a lot of fun. And maybe for the listener who's not familiar with art so much and what artists do, maybe you could tell a little bit about what an artist in residence position is.
Oh, okay. For some reason, it's not that well known. And so for someone not knowing what an art residency is, it's pretty common. It's set up generally through organizations in different parts of the world where they get funded by some sort of governmental agency or some sort of financial support, so that they allow artists to visit there and their city or their country or wherever it is they have their building, and they allow these artists to come and create work in a new environment with no distractions. The key being the lack of distractions from everyday life that normal artists have to go through. Like we were talking about teaching. What started is I was teaching 9 months a year, 10 months a year, and I wanted to be able to have a completely focused period of time where I could just dive into my work. And I started doing that every year, every July, for about 20 years of teaching. And then when I retired, I found that I still like those art residencies, because it's still fun to go sit in a new building and meet new artists and then have a show at the end usually. But now I find that I'd rather just be a little bit more independent and rent a studio space in a new place and just go there by myself, so that I won't have to share so much of the living quarters with everyone. It's not that I don't mind sharing a bathroom and a kitchen, but when you get to be my age, you kind of don't want to share a bathroom. So
you have your own way of doing things, right?
Yeah, well, it's just that you kind of want to be able to focus on the work and not be distracted by maybe some things that are going on with the organization itself. The key element here is to do enough research before you agree to flying off to a new place to work at their facility, because sometimes when you get there, it's not quite the same as what you had imagined. And let's say the studio isn't big enough, and let's say the people that are running it aren't able to meet your needs physically. Like you say before you leave, well, yes, I need a smooth wall, and you get there, and the wall is, really bumpy, and I draw straight onto the wall on a piece of paper. And so then you have to stop for maybe 2 or 3 days while they sand that wall down. So the more information you have before you leave, of course, the better it is. And then the other thing to remember is to remember to do the research on the weather before you go there, and don't book, let's say, an art residency in the middle of the Yucatan in July. Maybe do the research and find out that indeed it's going to be high humidity, and you might not be able to work very well if the sweat is pouring off your face.
Right.
So
certain mediums probably wouldn't work that well in certain environments, I would think.
Yeah, well, the one time in the Yucatan, I had the problem with mosquitoes, and I just couldn't function because they were biting me through my clothes.
Uh-huh.
So, but anyway, usually I pick areas like Amsterdam or Holland that you can depend on the weather to a certain extent, and you can depend on the efficiency of the people that are running it. And so I've limited a little bit of my residencies now to where I can expect things to go pretty well.
But you've gone to so many places, you've had so much experience, you can be a little bit more selective. You've had those world experiences, and which is great. I think I agree. Obviously, people who know me know that I love to travel and meet new people and discover new things and, try and get in a museum visit everywhere I go.
Yeah, well, that's what you have to do, because otherwise, what makes that city different than the next city? If you don't see the work, if you're interested in art, of course, if you don't see the work that they find to be their best art out of that region, then you're not really seeing the city if you don't see what art they're exhibiting.
Right. Yeah. You have to taste the food, see the art, meet the people.
Yeah.
It's all, you just can't go to McDonald's
Yeah.
because it's comfortable. It's just not going to give you a real sense of travel.
No.
Not that I have anything against the occasional McDonald's French fries, but
Well, I have been known to go to McDonald's if it was the only place open and you're about to pass out from hunger. Sometimes it's like at a train station or airport, or if it's in the middle of the night or something, maybe it's the only place that you can eat.
Right. Well, there's that.
Yeah.
We got to find the place that's convenient to eat.
Yeah.
And, and McDonald's is not the same everywhere. They have some really great pastries in Vienna.
Oh,
McDonald's.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Mac Cafe.
And some of the McDonald's are like fancy.
Yeah.
It's like you're going into a 3-star restaurant or something. It's crazy. And McDonald's has free Wi-Fi anywhere you go in the world.
Yeah, McDonald's and Starbucks, I guess, too.
Oh, yeah.
So
and
those are handy.
Yeah.
A good thing. So there are very good things about the familiar too.
Well, yeah, especially if you want to write to your family and say, "I made it to this country. I'm alive and I'm standing here." So.
Yeah, they might want to know that if you're on your own. Although I suppose if you're in a really cool spot, they come along with you or come and visit you when you're done.
Well, my husband usually comes about maybe between 2 and 4 weeks after I started, so I've got a body of work going by the time he shows up. And then he's still pretty respectful and lets me finish the show if I'm going to have a show at the end of the residency. And then as soon as we hang the show, then we usually take off and go someplace for vacation. So that's what we did last year. We got to go to Morocco right after leaving Holland, and it was quite a jump.
But an interesting experience. I've been both places and they're both wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So did you like Morocco too?
Oh, yeah. Very much.
Yeah.
Both places I would love to visit again. Yep. I would say very nice.
Yeah.
Now, as far as teaching, you were my art teacher. I learned drawing from Diane Richey-Ward, and you taught primarily that for 20 years, right?
Yes. 23.
23 years. And what sort of got you into teaching?
Well, I never planned to be a teacher. A lot of people growing up think, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a teacher. Like my daughter has always been like that. When I graduated with my master's in drawing and painting, I found that there's no other way to make money in the fine arts. and so I was surprised at how hard it was for me to get a teaching job with a master's. It took 3 years. But because there's so many artists in the world, especially in California, that all the other artists have the same issue, that they can't make money by the sale of their art. If you only sell 1 or 2 a year, it's not going to pay the rent. So you're competing against all the other nice, competent people that are artists that also would like to make a living. But anyway, once I got started, I really enjoyed it. And I found that I learned a lot through teaching, both by preparing for what I was going to say and by what the students had to say. So there was a reciprocal bit of information going back and forth that was pretty inspiring. And I also, the best thing I liked about teaching was not so much the first couple of weeks when you're standing in front of a bunch of strangers trying to interest them, but the last month or so of the semesters at American River College were just fantastic because the students had started to accumulate enough skills and enough experience that they could actually make pieces that were pretty powerful. And it's pretty satisfying to have students be so productive and so interesting in their work at the end of the semester.
Yeah. There was always amazing stuff that people put out, I found in my classes.
Yeah. I mean, and then the funny thing is that Facebook keeps putting back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago images. And it'll say, 5 years ago today, you posted this picture, and I often posted student drawings, and I'm so surprised at how fantastic they are. I mean, not surprised, but I'm pleased that those kinds of images were able to come out of my class. I was very proud.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people who came to art never having drawn before.
Yeah, and that's what it's like at a community college. Some of the students maybe they didn't have an art teacher in elementary school, or they didn't take any art classes in high school, and yet they always felt that they would be good at it. And then I was able to give them some sort of help in making their goals met. They wanted to be able to create something that they looked at. So it was just really fun.
Well, it's good to look back on a career and feel that sense of satisfaction, I'm sure.
Well, yeah. At first I was like so excited to have free time that that I was just like on cloud 9 running around. And now that it's been a couple of years, I realize that, I do kind of miss all the student interactions. So that's good too. And I end up going back to school and seeing students and talking to my peers that I used to teach with. And it's really fun to see how they're doing and everything. They're all jealous of me, though, because I get to work in the studio all the time.
Well, of course, that is one of the fun things, I think, is that when you retire, if your health is good, you can devote yourself to things you really wanted to do but never had time to do before.
When I first started teaching in 1990, I guess, or 1993, one of my friends said, "Oh, once you start teaching, you'll never really be the artist you wanted to be because your attention will be diverted." And when they said that, it made me so mad that I was determined for that not to be true for me. And I always worked as an artist and had regular shows the whole time. Because if I felt like I didn't want that lady to be true, to be right. So
funny the things that motivate us.
Well, she was someone I respected and who had been a full-time teacher for a long time. So that's why it affected me so much, is because I felt like the truth of that, what she said was possible. So, and there's a few of us, like Mick Sheldon and I and Craig Smith at American River, we all vowed to not let our work output be diminished by too much distraction from teaching. So we all did the work.
Yeah, so. Well, that's one thing about me. I found, having to be in class to kind of get me going, and maybe I should take some motivation from you and do my art more while I'm running around and doing other wonderful things like talking to people on podcasts. But
yeah, well, I mean, but
it always carve out some time.
Yeah, well, it always boils down to doing what gives you the most pleasure and the most joy, and if you actually get quite a bit of pleasure, which it seems like you do, by talking to people and interviewing people and traveling around meeting other people that do the same thing. I mean, then maybe that's what you should, just focus on and not worry about whether or not you've done enough artwork lately.
Yeah. Of course, but when I do it, it's fun. And obviously one of the challenges of having way too many interests, but
yeah.
But still that makes life interesting. Now,
it does,
yeah, to have lots of things that you're interested in. Now, as far as, were you going to say something there? Did I interrupt?
No, I was just going to say that sometimes when I only do artwork and I almost become a hermit, I almost think that somehow it might be taking away from the things that I might be seeing or experiencing. So I have to force myself to make social engagements or to go places. So I just wanted to say that getting around and meeting other people and doing things other than art might be a good idea sometimes.
Every now and then it is good to have a little diversity.
Yeah, I guess so.
And like you said, with your travels, of course, then you can incorporate that into your art. So you managed to do a pretty good balance, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I really have a great family with, family in the Bay Area and in Southern California. So I do spend quite a bit of time visiting both sides of the family. So that's good.
And speaking of family, when you grew up, were you in a family of artists? How did you get into art? What was it? Just something that sparked your interest in school, or how did that happen?
my mother was always interested in art because her mother was an artist that was a self-taught artist who did like really beautiful oil-painted landscapes of oceans crashing on rocks and things like that were popular in the 60s. Mm-hmm. The really beautiful landscapes. And, I thought those paintings were nice, but it wasn't until I started to go to high school, like I said earlier, about wanting to photograph everything I saw. And I was included in the art journal, the high school art journal. And if you get a little bit of encouragement in any kind of field, it tends to make you more interested in that field. So I got quite a bit of attention for the photographs. And then I had an art drawing class right at the end of my high school years. And the teacher was pretty encouraging also. So by the time I got to Cal State Hayward, I was committed to focusing on art. My mom, didn't have any art training, and she didn't really understand some of the work that I did over the years, and she always wanted me to work a little bit more realistically. And I think if she would have had more exposure to fine art other than her mother, I think she might have understood my work a little bit more, but she was pretty encouraging sometimes. I'll never forget, though, the first time I brought home a portfolio from my first class at Cal State Hayward, and she was not encouraging at that point. And I had to bite back disappointment that, my mom didn't care for my artwork, to realize that I had at least a little bit more training than she did. And I knew that you have to go to school, you have to go to many years of training before you get good enough to the point that you can have exhibits and be real proud of the work you're doing.
Right. I mean, it doesn't usually come the first time you try and draw. you
yeah,
don't produce a masterpiece.
Yeah. The first semester is not the time that you determine whether or not you want to be an artist.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Picasso was turning out masterpieces
yeah.
from a very young age, just like Mozart. But there are some great musicians that struggled through a lot of years and many artists who struggled through a number of years before they started producing the kind of work we know them for.
Yeah, that's true. And Picasso, his dad, recognized his skills when he was really young, and he was highly trained in kind of a realism type painting, and he knew his son was more advanced than he was at an early age, but he gave him really good skills and experience, and made him paint and made him work all the time when he was little. And so by the time he was 20, he was already a master. So
yeah, so he did his share of work.
Yeah,
even if we think he was brilliant from the get-go.
Yeah, no, you have to earn it. Uh-huh. And a lot of people think, I can work on Sunday between 2 and 5, and I will make a masterpiece. And what happens is I work sometimes 2 or 3 days, from maybe 9 to 3, or 10 to 4 or something. It's not 9 hours, but it's a good stretch of hours there in a row in my dark studio in my garage. And sometimes after 3 days, you don't have anything. And if you just have to realize that that's the way it goes. You made 20 or 30 pieces, but they're not up to your standard. You have to know that you might need 3 or 4 or 5 more full days before you come up with anything that works. So you have to have perseverance.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of things. But yeah, that's interesting to know that's in your process. And then your work, of course, is, well, there's bits of realism because you have, particularly with the photographs, and you do realistic type, well, abstract realism. I don't know. I mean, I have a picture of boats. They're clearly boats that you drew, which I love. And I see your images sometimes just, a number of shapes and things, but there's obviously objects and drawings and beautiful stuff.
Well, the show that I have up right now, most of those are pretty representational. So,
right.
Yeah. And they're way more colorful than I used to do. So I like the change, but it might be that, next year I do a year's worth of work that is non-objective, and you can't really tell what it is.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to include some of your pieces of art on our Facebook page and on our website so that people can.
Oh, that'd be great.
Take a look, and of course, if they get to see one of your shows, that would be wonderful. The one right now is probably just going till the end of this month, right?
It's just today and tomorrow, and I'll be there tomorrow from 12 to 5 on Sunday. But then the next weekend, we're taking it down. So
yeah. So this broadcast won't go up till it's well over. But you periodically have shows here in the Sacramento area.
Yes.
And
last year I had a show at Art Space 1616, which I really liked that space because it had really high ceilings and the work had some room to breathe. You know how if you have a kind of a complex piece, you need to have some white around it so that you can look at it without being distracted by something right next to it. So I really enjoy showing in a place that I can fit some white around each piece.
Yeah, things are a little crowded at the East Street Gallery where you are right now. But it's a neat kind of gallery. I like it because the work is interesting and even though it's a smaller space, it's still a fun place to visit and see art. But you're right. When you have more, I like going into galleries where things are roomy and well lit.
It's just like a clothing store. When you go into those fancy stores, like when I go in Holland, they have these stores where there are these huge racks and there's like 3 items on each rack. And the whole store might have 20 items of clothing. And each one of them costs a fortune. But when you pick up a piece and it's one of the only ones on the rack, you really give it a good look. You know?
I know. I was in New York recently, and I was walking down the street there in Tribeca, and there's an Issey Miyake clothing store, and there's just this one little rack. Well, it's the longest rack, but with a few pieces of clothing, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I sure looked at those clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a couple other pieces in the window, but basically there was not much there. But boy, did I do a careful examination of everything as I walked past every time. So you're right about that.
That's true. Yeah, you just don't want to just glance at a piece that that someone put a lot of work into. You kind of want to see it unadorned by anything else around it. So
that's so very true.
Yeah.
So you said a teacher who gave you encouragement in high school. Were there other influences through your life? I mean, besides places, obviously you've traveled, and those kinds of experiences in your residencies have influenced you. Can you pinpoint any other key influences in your life?
Well, again, it goes back to going to school. When you are exposed to great masters, like I took an art history class when I was about 21. It was my first time I was able to see on a large screen artists from many different generations and many different centuries. And oh my God, I was so inspired. And it's just like, if he can do that, I can do this. And maybe what if I did this? It's just, oh my God. I was just, I was really attracted to Edvard Munch, I think, was one of my first inspirations because his work had this darkness about it, kind of a primal kind of a feel to it. And I was really attracted to things that were a little bit scary when I first started out. And so the first 5 years I was doing artwork, everything was kind of macabre. But then I kept studying and kept going to school, and I found that I just primarily was interested in expressionist type artists, like de Kooning was abstract expressionist, but I didn't really come to him until I went to grad school. But anyone like all those German expressionists like Nolde and artists that use really bright colors and harsh lines and things like that, people that were working directly from a feeling rather than from a concept. And so those types of expressionist movements have always been more interesting to me than more calculated artwork, like, let's say, like color-filled painters or Malevich or I don't know. I can't think of any examples right now of artists that are, but I'm not very conceptually based. I'm not interested so much by preconceived notion. I'm interested more in formal aspects of what does this line do on top of this color, and how does that relate to any kind of feeling or experience. So it's a pretty formal interest that I have in artwork now. So if I just recently applied to a residency in Lisbon in September, and I picked that place because they gave you a whole apartment. And
cool.
so you had your own gallery, your own studio space and your own kitchen and your own apartment. And so I picked it not because of that, but I liked the artwork that they showed on their website. I put the best application I could, showing the work that I had done and a motivation for why I wanted to go to Lisbon. And of course, you don't get accepted to all these residencies. I oftentimes will get accepted to 25% of the ones that I apply for. But this hangar, the name of the place was called Hangar, wrote back to me and they said, your work does not fit within our aesthetic. Your work does not fit within our mission. I can't remember exactly the words they used. I was interested in that because most people just turn you down without giving you a reason, or you don't hear any answer at all. But the fact that they told me why, and then I looked back at the rest of their artwork that they supported, and it was more concept based, more like an installation based on an idea. And so, of course, I should have maybe noticed that before I applied. But so it's always important to do the research before you apply in terms of what that residency focuses on.
Right. And you also need to have a good body of work and things to present to these people, or you're not going to get one.
Yeah, I gave a lecture a few years ago in Utah to the University of Utah. And after an hour, I said, now, if anyone has any questions, just come down to the bottom and I'll answer those to the podium. And so about 10 students came down, and one by one, they all asked the exact same question. How do you get those art residencies? How do you get those art residencies? They didn't want to know anything. They didn't want to know anything about my work. They wanted to know, how do you get to fly to another country and do that artwork? I finally had to stop about the third person, and I said, well, first of all, you guys need to get your degrees first. You have to complete your education, and I would highly suggest getting a master's degree to kind of develop your own style and develop your own vision first before you apply to these places, because you might not get a response if they think you're just starting out. But about a year later, I saw a couple residencies that focused on young artists that have just graduated. Oh. So I was able to write back to the professor there that had hired me to come and give that website out to her students, because there are residencies out there that do focus on beginning artists or artists that are just coming out into the world. So,
well, yes. That's good to know. So there's a variety of positions, but most of the ones would probably require people to have a fair body of work and a real point of view.
Yes, absolutely. And the other thing you have to prepare, one of my biggest tips if you're trying to get a residency someplace, is to research the city that you want to go to, or the area that you want to go to, and figure out exactly what it is about that particular place that would help you with your work. If you don't say that in your application, the chances are pretty slim that you're going to get it, because it looks like, why do you want to come here? It looks to me like you want to go anywhere. Specifically, you have to tell them, what inspires that particular place for your work. So,
like any job application, right?
Yeah. I've learned a lot about applying, and it helps. And you have to be able to take rejection as the other thing. As an artist, every artist has to develop a pretty thick skin, and if you take every art residency rejection as a sign that you're not good, that's ridiculous. You just have to go and apply to another one. Right,
because like you said, in your case, you had missed something about the type of art that they were looking for. And of course, your application didn't match what they wanted. So, it was understandable. It had nothing to do with you as a person.
No, that's true. And what I did do is I ended up, finding a place. It was almost impossible to find, but a place in Lisbon that they will let me do the artwork in their apartment, even though they're not a residency. So I get to do that, but I would like to contact the landlord and say, it would be nice if you could introduce me to some of the arts people in town and some of the galleries in town, so that I could make some human connections and I wasn't just in a studio flat by myself for a month. So,
yeah. And maybe visiting the place that you were rejected from might be a helpful thing, right? Just for the interaction.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely was planning to go there, and I was accepted to another one in Lisbon, and I want to go meet them too. I didn't accept it because they had some issues. They had a curating team that was supposed to come and talk to you about your work every week. And I go, I don't want a bunch of people coming into my studio talking to me about my work every week. It was a little bit too invasive, but anyway, so I want to meet both of those groups when I go there.
Right. Well, that sounds like fun though. And I'll be interested in seeing what work you do generate out of that experience.
Yeah.
I think, we've covered a lot of the things that I was planning to ask you. One of the things I always talk to my guests about and try and communicate to the listener is just some of your general thoughts about creativity for people and just some general thoughts. Would be helpful.
Oh, okay. Well, the main thing that I would say to encourage any kind of creativity is to, of course, be open to new things and to try to look at things in a new way. I know this is really a simple example, but even taking a painting that you find interesting and turning it upside down, you're seeing it from a different perspective, and that might make you conceive of a new way of making a piece. If you're looking at something that you already found attractive going one way, turn the sucker around. Try to expose yourself to ideas that you don't normally think you would like a movie, for example. I mean, don't always go to movies that you would like. Maybe go to a movie that's the opposite of what you would like, and you might be surprised at what kinds of ideas pop into your mind after seeing something that's completely new for you. Also, it's important to, like I said earlier, to keep trying different ways of doing the same thing. Try it in this medium and that doesn't work. Try it in that medium, that doesn't work. Try doing it backwards. The main thing is if you run into a roadblock on creativity, you need to stop and come at it from a completely different angle or come back to it a month later. Don't think that avenue might not be open to you. You might just need to give it some space and some time and looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah. And then you were saying, and also you mentioned different media, because when you were teaching, I mean, you had us try different things. And I always found it was really interesting how some things came more naturally to some people than others. Oh, for sure. It's just, it all depends on what your background is, but in general, just hard work and trying new things will generally help out, and being open to new ideas. Right. And you mentioned movies, and I thought of something, because you aren't the only artist in your family. You have a daughter who works in movies, right? Oh, yeah. And she's really always thought of herself as an artist, but after she graduated from film school, she got connected up in being a producer, which is oftentimes perceived as the least creative aspect of filmmaking because you're hiring people to do all the creative work. But she ended up being a creative producer by having a big hand in what the pieces would look like and what they would sound like. But now she's applying for grad school, and she just got an interview at Columbia to do directing, a master's in directing, MFA. So hopefully she'll get back onto her creative self. Oh, wonderful. So, yeah. How fun. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Yeah, well, it's a different medium than yours entirely, but very interesting art that runs through your family, it seems. Oh, sure, yeah. No, she's really creative. And my younger daughter, has lots of things that she's good at, and maybe she didn't pick creativity as her lead interest, but she certainly is doing lots of interesting things. So... Yeah, we always wonder and are sometimes amazed at what our children decide to pursue. Oh yeah, I guess you have that with your sons too. Yes. I've really had fun talking to you today. You too, Karen. Thanks so much for being a guest. Oh, thank you. And thanks for having me on your program. No problem. Love it. Okay. Bye now. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Show notes from today's episode of A Creative Approach podcast, where you can learn more about my guest, Diane Richey-Ward, are available on the webpage www.acreativeapproachpodcast.com. Photos of some of Diane's work are available on that podcast website on the Patreon page, and will also be available on the Creative Approach Podcast Facebook group page. You will need to be a member of our Facebook group page to view the information there. The information and images on the Patreon site are available to all. Membership is not a prerequisite. I do want to take this opportunity to thank my Patreon donors for their contributions to the show. We'd love to have you join the Facebook group page for A Creative Approach podcast. Not only do we post content, but there's where your questions and feedback on the show are most welcome. A Creative Approach podcast does have a general Facebook page, and all our episodes are listed there as well as posted on our webpage. You'll also find affiliate links for our show at A Creative Approach podcast website. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to A Creative Approach podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Please join us in future conversations where I hope you will find inspiration to make things, tell your story, and explore a creative approach to life.